Hello, I'm Angel Wichi Perez.
Hello, I'm Leonel Rico.
Hello,
Hello.
I'm.
Oh,
Oh, sorry, man. Go for it.
sorry. Hi, I'm Brianna Ibarra. Sorry, Eric.
No, no worries. I'm Eric Kumpel. We're gonna read our poem.
Okay, so starting todos los días sin darte cuenta, sin hacer alguna acción que rete tu pensamiento, creyendo que lo que no haces te hace más solidario con la gente, sin pensar cómo la ignorancia te convierte en uno de ellos. Pero dime, ¿es solo el opresor el que mantiene cerrada tu mente?
Segregation is hate. Racism lurks into fate. Everyone is different. We should not bring the hate. What does it cost to stand up for our words? Brutality is the shame. We cannot fight for our fate.
Through histories of conquest, silent cries, we seek the truth that systemic bias denies. In classrooms where marginalized voices rise, we forge new paths beneath hopeful skies.
Colonized humanity. She sits wounded and battered on display. Abandon your roots. Throw on a suit. Stay in line. Marry white. Cleanse yourself of your earth-colored skin. That's when your freedom shall begin. That is our poem. And we're gonna start with Angel. He did the first portion of the poem, and we're gonna go through and discuss what it means to us as it relates to the last few weeks' lectures. So go ahead, Angel.
So I kind of based my lines on week 9. We were discussing a little bit on how a thesis is a conclusion that we arrived by analyzing evidence, and how that interacts with what it means to be racist, which a part of it is not actively being anti-racist, being passive racist. And I know it's in Spanish, but gonna translate it a little bit.
Yeah.
It is saying a little bit like not realizing, and there's like action to challenge your own mind. And while not doing anything, it doesn't really make you more understanding to other people and helping eliminate racism. So at the end of the line, it's more, is it really the oppressor who makes your your mindset narrow or closed? But also I wanted to reference in some way the discussion we had in class, that one of the ways to end racism and to start making a critical mindset was beginning in the classrooms, teaching how to deconstruct the, how do you say, the mindset, the common mindset of not really thinking much about the society we're in and just letting things happen. That is what most people just say, like, well, I don't really do much, so I don't think I'm racist.
Exactly. Yeah, I like that. I like that Kindi makes that distinction between active racism or passive racism and anti-racism. And like in your poem, you ask or you pose the idea, like, is it who's actually like who's in charge of changing that framework, the mind? Are you being oppressed? Or are you oppressing yourself by this lack of acknowledgement or knowledge? And that's a huge way, like, that we can change the structures of educational oppression, is empowering people to even to have that perspective, to introduce that that possibility, that reality to individuals. I know. Yeah, I love that. So good.
Yeah, I also liked your, while you were doing your explanation, you asked the question of, is it really the oppressor that, you know, makes you think that way? And it's really a really good point, you know, because sometimes I feel like as Chicanos, like our, you know, some of us have really conservative family, I'm sure, and it just feels like sometimes we're getting in our own way without any help, you know. And obviously it all comes from a oppressed mindset that we need to deconstruct, a colonized mindset, but it is hard sometimes, you know. So that's a good question.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that you chose to do it in Spanish. I love that, or I always think of, you said, or when we got in this group and we're getting to know each other, that you grew up in Mexico and moved here and you're doing your higher education here. So obviously you speak fluent English, but Spanish being like the language in which you're most comfortable communicating, and especially communicating a feeling and a sentiment. There's so much wisdom and meaning in words. So choosing to write it in your native tongue is really taking back some power to yourself as well, you know, where you're like owning that space. Like, this is where I thrive, and this is where you can really like put your thought, your meaning, and your intent into. So yeah, it's awesome.
Pretty much we're like
Yeah.
spreading our culture, like our language, our ideas, you know, all of that.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
Cool. Well, Leo, if you'd like to go next, please feel free.
So I covered week 10 and we pretty much talked about segregation and how it affects us Chicanos and Black students as well. So pretty much Kendi notes about dwelling consciousness, which is the which is which are both racist ideas, which is segregationism and assim what's it called? I
Simulation.
don't know. There's
Simulation.
another word.
Mhm.
But pretty much they get caught into those racist ideas.
Mhm.
And we also talked about police brutality as well. How it targets Chicano students here that live in the US about, you know, being deported back to Mexico. And I feel like that's unfair because um pretty much, you know, we're pretty much hurting our citizens here in America. We were born here, but yet we are treating bad to how we look. But we're still one big group. We're still part of our country. And, you know, we also talked about the rise of undocumented immigrants and how that is also rising up to the the KKK. Don't really like to say that word.
Right.
But you know, it's just really unfair for like us trying to like have a good life here. And you know, we're just trying to have a better life, a good education, and a bright future for us. And you know, with all of these supremacists that are attacking us, it's just out of control.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like part of my poem, and there's like this thing where I address humanity, and it's just like it removes the humanity from the individual, and that's what colonialism has done. I guess that's like initially as well, like That's a good marker of a successful colonialized society, is removing the individual or removing the humanity out of a people, out of a generation, a whole race of people, stripping them of innate human rights, you know, like you said, to an education, to a healthy, you know, to have a job, to put healthy food on their plates and provide for their families. Like those are basic, very basic human rights, you know. But a huge, those are just a really big examples of a colonialized structure that where some people thrive and others, they're subhuman essentially.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And it just reminds me of, you know, this is not about Spanish colonization, but a lot of like the Americans would they made these schools and they would put Native Americans in the schools and basically wipe them of who they are really.
Yeah.
And it's so, I mean, not obviously there's nothing worse than like physically harming someone, but it's another level of cruelty to completely wipe who someone is and teach them that who they are and who they've been their whole life is wrong, and that all their culture, their deep storied history, and basically just doing their best to scrub it and wipe it and as if it never existed. And what's even worse is that, you know, even if they're successful in taking these indigenous peoples, colonizing them and wiping their history, once they're done, then now these people are no longer connected to their indigenous roots. But not only that, but now they're never going to be a true part of their colonizers either. So they kind of exist in this awful state of limbo where they have almost no identity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which is the shared experience of anyone existing on a border, you know, like which we talked a lot about when we were reading Gloria Anzaldúa, is about like this, yeah, having one foot in, one foot out, never fully belonging to one place, and
Right.
constantly trying to be, you know, one or the other. Yeah, it's a terrible, and not being able to, and then even in between your race, feeling some sort of like kickback or racism between your own people. Like you're not Mexican enough for Mexicans and you're not white enough for the Anglo side, you know, it's just this constant dance, just never fitting in. Yeah.
And then people from your own group will make fun of you if you're too Mexican, then you're like a paisa or something. So there's just all kinds of weird, arbitrary ways to.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
like ethnic racism, just racism within a race. Yeah. Oh no.
Yeah, you can really see Spanish speaking friends seeing you a little bit weird because you share experiences that happened in the US or something related to that.
Yeah.
And when you go with your American friends, they kind of have this image of you being Mexican,
Right.
or it's a weird bridge.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Eric, do you want to
Sure.
discuss?
I'll go for it. With mine, I sort of worked backwards. So I just kind of looked at my notes for the week and what we discussed. And then I kind of just wrote the poem after writing some like analysis of it. And my main focus with my poem has a lot to do with, I mean, Dr. Garcia references Freire a lot. And I think that's super cool because, well, I'm just got the chance to read some Freire in my other class. And one thing he speaks on a lot is achieving critical consciousness, or in Portuguese, it's conscientização. And it's just like this idea that you cannot be truly free until you reach that state of critical consciousness. And one of those steps to achieving that is to acknowledge and to see the world around you, and only then you can be free. So when I wrote the line, um, through histories of conquest, silent cries, because a lot of times, especially in classrooms, teachers, whether it's a mandate, in some states like Texas, they won't speak about atrocities or things they have done to wipe the cultures of the oppressed. And so with the question of how do we enhance Chicano students or marginalized students' educational outcomes, I think one of the first steps has to be acknowledgement and trying to strive to reach that that level of critical consciousness or conscientização. And when I say we seek the truth that systemic bias denies, it's that yearning, that search for the truth of our history. Even as much as I like to think that I'm well informed, I did not know that there was many mass lynchings of Mexicans in America, in the early 1900s and late 1800s, and since then. And that was just like a shocker for me, and I felt like I don't think we glossed over it, but for me, it was such a moment in class where I was like, wait, what? Like in class, I went on Google and I was looking it up and I was like, I can't believe this, and I thought that I didn't think I knew everything, but I was just still surprised that I was surprised.
Yeah, totally.
So that's kind of where I was going with mine. It had a lot to do like with inside the classroom. So when I say in classrooms where marginalized voices rise, I feel that the classroom has to be a space that welcomes, that is radical, and radical in the sense that you're unafraid to speak on topics that others, especially your oppressors, may feel uncomfortable, because no one likes to know, or no one wants to go relive things that were bad in the past, but it's important to do so. And so I feel like marginalized students have to be empowered to speak up and contribute and share their experiences, instead of it being hush hush or only talked about in one certain month, kind of like Black History Month. Like it needs to be a part of history and a part of the syllabus on every history class. These things need to be discussed. And my last line is, we forge new paths beneath hopeful skies. And even like nowadays, it's really hard, especially election season. We all know who our two candidates are, and one of them especially. But I think it's very important to maintain hope. And another thing that Freire discusses is how being a fatalistic mindset is counterproductive. Because if you just give in and you say everything's inevitable and there's nothing I can do, then your oppressor has achieved total dominance. Because once you give up and you don't try anymore, then you've given up the fight, and then it's over. So I think there's no benefit to that type of outlook. And I think a lack of hope will create like a self-fulfilling prophecy of oppression. So I think it is important, even if you move the ball of progress forward 1 inch, that's 1 inch that the next person doesn't have to move it, So I think it's important to remain hopeful.
Yeah, absolutely. And in doing this project, I was thinking that a really amazing, we had discussed this a little bit in class last week, so I guess week 12, but about really decolonizing structural educational oppression, and like projects like this, like having a creative outlet to express an idea or a movement or a thought, a feeling, is where it starts, and empowering students in a classroom to take chances, to be vulnerable, to do different things that in our capitalistic oppressive society we're not encouraged to do those things. So really, that's a huge way we can change the outcome for oppressed peoples in our educational system, is empower them to be creative, to take chances, along with decolonizing the educational materials that we're learning. But like, even for us in this class, like there's, at any age, there's still so much opportunity to deconstruct and decolonize and really analyze our patterns, our thinkings, and where we're coming from, and things that we've held as truths, and question them and just start to deconstruct the world around us. It's super important. Yeah, I liked your line in your poem about that. I thought it was really cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, my section of the poem really focused on we talked a lot about expressions of the white strategy the last like week. So that being like assimilation or like marrying into white families, or like there's so many different ways that the white strategy has played out, and even like ethnic racism. You know, there's Kendi talks about in chapter 5 ethnic racism, and talks about the origins of it dating back to slave owners, and there being examples of ethnic racism between like the blacks in these ports, who was more desirable as a better slave, or as, you know, like just um when people were human products essentially, you know,
Right.
like a commodity. So applying some sort of value onto certain people because they came from certain regions, and creating like this, yeah, inner racism between these two ethnic, or between one ethnic group. And we talked a lot about, just a lot about that really. And this idea of like becoming more white, you know, like the, I don't know, I wrote that thing like cleansing yourself of your earth colored skin, like the idea of the more lighter you are presented, or this idea of being more Anglo or European appearing, like adds value. And it's like removing all of those constructs, like really deconstructing that colonial mindset, and yeah, owning who we are and where our lineage comes from, you know. And yeah, that's kind of like where my piece came from. um yeah.
Yeah, I like your poem as well, especially like I like how it kind of it takes these ideas that are so ridiculous, you know, like like this just the line, cleanse yourself of your earth-colored skin, that's where your freedom begins, you
Mhm.
know.
Yeah.
Like on its face is like what a ridiculous idea, you know, but you're kind of just putting it out there and saying like this is, at least I feel, you know, you're just kind of exposing it for how ridiculous it is, you know,
Yeah.
and how like that whole idea is just so arbitrary.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have less than a minute on the recording.
Yeah.
uh
Okay.
I don't know if we should start another one to wrap it up, or I feel
I,
like it might cut out.
I think we've done well, guys. I think maybe we, if you want to conclude, I'm in.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like our poem overall had a really great, I loved the flow, and I loved everyone's personal touch on what they took away from all of our discussions in class, all of the lectures. And yeah, I thought it was, I love like the piecing